In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathens do. This verse is sometimes used to challenge the Rosary prayer. Why would that be? Well, in the Rosary, one uses a number of different prayers, and the most frequently used prayer is the Hail Mary. The Hail Mary is used quite a number of times, depending on how many decades of the Rosary you wish to pray. To some people, this violates the statement of Jesus that says we should not use vain repetitions. What should we make of this injunction from our Lord? Should we stop praying the Rosary? Hello friends, welcome to Pills of Faith and Liberty with Shinshima Desmond. Before we proceed to attempt an answer to the questions raised, click on the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to get rich contents like this one. In other translations of Mathew 6 verse 7, which is quoted above from the King James Version, you will see that this verse is translated somewhat differently. You may, for example, find it stated that we should not keep up empty phrases, or that we should not go on babbling, or even that we should not speak much. Those are all possible interpretations. But in the Greek translation, which is the original language in which the text was written, the word that is translated as repetition in the English version is much more related to a stammerer. That is, a person who has a stutter. And so, we can translate Matthew 6 verse 7 to mean, don't go stammering on like the Gentiles do. If that's what it means, then it's clear that Jesus is using a metaphor. A metaphor is a situation wherein a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. You will agree with me that Jesus is using a metaphor because all pagans didn't literally stammer when they prayed to the gods. Now, what might the metaphor mean? Well, a very important clue to its meaning lies in what Jesus goes on to say next. For they think, meaning the pagans, that they will be heard. For there are many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. And so, that's really what Jesus is concerned about. That is, having a false idea about God, where God becomes to you like the pagan gods, who are limited beings that don't have any knowledge or sense, or even sense things. You have to tell them, and you even have to win them over by using lots of words. That's not the way the true God is. The real God knows everything even before you ask. So you don't have to convince Him by using a lot of words. That's what Jesus is really concerned with here. It's obvious though that even if you wanted to translate this passage literally as use not vain repetitions, that repetitions are vain, there will still be a fundamental problem, because not all repetitions are vain. And we can prove this from a number of things in the Bible, including the teachings of Jesus Himself. Jesus told at least 2 parables in the Gospels of Luke that hinge precisely on the idea that we need to be persistent in prayer. That means if our prayer is not immediately granted, we go to God again and repeat our petition. One of them, the very famous one, is the parable of the unjust judge. I bet you know that parable where Jesus argues that if even an unjust judge will respond to the plea of a persistent widow who keeps asking for justice, who repeats her requests, how much more will our God respond to our petitions? And Luke specifically says that Jesus told this parable to teach His disciples to always pray and never give up. From this widow, we have an endorsement from our Lord Himself of the idea of repeating petitions in prayer. Another similar parable is the parable of the friend who comes in the night and begs. The friend inside, is resistant to getting out of bed. He's asleep. His kids are asleep. Even though they are friends, he's resistant to getting up. But because of his friend's persistence, he gets up and gives him as much as he needs. So it's another example of repeated prayer that Jesus is endorsing. So obviously, not all repetitions are bad. In fact, even using the same words as we do in the Rosary prayer is not bad. How do we know that? Well, Jesus told His disciples, pray then like this: Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, and so on. I know you know that prayer better than me. Jesus taught his disciples the Lord's Prayer, so he gives them a model prayer that they can repeat. So, obviously again, not all repetitions are vain. In fact, Jesus gives them a prayer to be repeated, a prayer which incidentally is part of the Rosary. Now, there are lots of different places in scriptures where you find prayer formulas that are repeated. One particular place is the book of Psalms. The entire book of Psalms is a collection of hymns or prayers set as music, that is, prayer in the form of a song, which are meant to be repeated. They are meant by their nature to be used over and over again, and some of them have some very interesting properties. For example, there is Psalm 136. This psalm is a fascinating song. So what does Psalm 136 say? Well, it is what's known in technical terms as a litany, which is a series of petitions that are offered to God. And it's a particular kind of litany that has an antiphon that keeps coming in. It's like a refrain that keeps coming in, and you can see that the refrain beginning in the very first verse of the psalm, which says, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever." And the phrase, "and his mercy endureth forever," keeps repeating throughout the psalm. So, Psalm 136, which was likely prayed at the end of the Last Supper by Jesus and the disciples, is highly repetitive. And that again underscores the fact that it's not the repetition that's the issue. What's really important is the attitude of the heart. It is perhaps for this reason that Pope John Paul II wrote concerning the Rosary in an apostolic letter that the Rosary, precisely because it starts with Mary's own experience, is an exquisitely contemplative prayer. Without this contemplative dimension, it will lose its meaning, as Pope Paul VI clearly pointed out. Without contemplation, the Rosary is a body without a soul, and its recitation runs the risk of becoming a mechanical repetition of formulas in violation of the admonition of Christ in praying, "Do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do." By its nature, the recitation of the Rosary calls for a quiet reading and a lingering pace, helping the individual to meditate on the mysteries of the Lord's life as seen through the eyes of Mary, who was closest to the Lord. In this way, the riches of these mysteries are disclosed. So, Catholics acknowledge that you can say the Rosary in a way that would diminish or rob it of its spiritual value if you are saying it with the wrong intent. But if you say it in a way that is contemplative and that helps you think about and dwell on and meditate on the mysteries of our Lord's life, then it's truly a Christ-centered prayer. I leave you with the words of Pope Pius XI. The Rosary is a powerful weapon to put the demons to flight and to keep oneself from sin. If you desire peace in your hearts, in your homes, and in your country, assemble each evening to recite the Rosary. Let not even one day pass without saying it, no matter how burdened you may be with many cares and labors. This video has come to an end. Go and pray your Rosary.